When the first Halo Infinite flight came out, Luke and I literally spent all of our time just exploring the intricate little details around all of the maps that were available in that first flight. But one thing we definitely slept on was a challenge available in that first flight that did come back this time around in the second flight, but 343 took it a step further and even increased the difficulty on this challenge. And since we missed it the first time around, we decided we would go for it while we have a chance with the second flight, even if it's extremely harder than when it initially was in the first flight. We're talking about the Halo Infinite weapon drills. And we're not just playing through the weapon drills like the filthy casuals we typically are when we do Halo things. No, we need to be good at Halo Infinite so we could one day beat Hidden Xperia in a 1v1 match. So we decided we would set out to try to get 3 stars on every single weapon drill in Halo Infinite's second flight. Now the way weapon drills work in Halo Infinite essentially is there are 3 specific drills for each weapon that is featured in the drills. They're supposed to help you refine your shooting ability and accuracy, and essentially gives you 1 to 3 stars based off of how high of a score you can get in the limited amount of time that you have. And I'll be honest, we struggled trying to get through these weapon drills. Now to make things more interesting, Luke and I decided to split up where I would be playing on the Xbox Series X and Luke would play on the mouse and keyboard so that we could see if there's differences in how the difficulty is or how some weapons work in an MNK setting versus a typical controller setting. And oh boy, things started off rough. So first up was the Halo Infinite Assault Rifle. I was curious how difficult it would be to get 3 stars on the 3 challenges for the AR. Challenge 1, I just moved as quickly as possible, trying to kill the enemies that are just standing still. And overall, I was feeling pretty good about the first one, just because if you aim for the chest, the recoil itself will bring you up just by the time the shields pop and you can get a headshot and move on to the next person relatively quickly after reloading. And I just quickly bounced around killing the targets as fast as possible, but after I saw my first score, I was pretty confident I could do it faster and just move faster and pay more attention. And sure enough, within another try or so, I ended up getting enough to get 3 stars, scoring around 19,000 points. And that's it for Assault Rifle being easy, because Assault Rifle 2 steps up the ante quite a bit. On Assault Rifle 2, things are stepped up in difficulty as the Spartans are now moving side to side, and you have to follow your shots alongside the Spartan and try to pop their shields and headshot them as quickly as possible. And I felt personally attacked because this specific weapon drill seems a little predatory to people like me who just spray all over the place and can't control their gun recoil. I did start to make a little bit of progress in my speed when I realized that reloading before finishing off a Spartan would practically be a death sentence, so I had to really focus in on utilizing my time and not have to get extra reloads in, since just 1 extra reload can eat into your time significantly. I also noticed if I just chilled on my right stick and sidestepped a bit alongside the Spartans that are walking, my reticle would typically stay lined up with their upper shoulders and head. And after a few runs of this, I was getting at least a little bit better, but I was still stuck around 16,000 points, which wasn't quite enough to get up to the 3 stars yet. Essentially, it just took a lot of trial and error and me really trying to focus in on reloading after every kill, so I wouldn't run into this awkward moment where I'm popping shields and having to stop and reload mid-shooting on a target. Instead, I'm reloading while I'm looking for the next target and lining up my shot, therefore I'm only losing maybe half of the time that I typically would if I had to reload mid-firing. So I did manage to progress my way past part 2, but then we got to part 3 on the Assault Rifle. And this is where things got really frustrating, because I struggled on the Assault Rifle part 3 for a very long time, and Luke, with mouse and keyboard, actually managed to just beat it on his 3rd try. Now I did go back and watch Luke's clip, and I do think he might have gotten a little bit lucky, because the Spartans that spawn in as targets are randomly generated in where they spawn. So you could have a run where they line up perfectly in a way where you can just clip from one straight to the other and not have to kind of look left to right and right to left back and forth every time they spawn in as often. Or at least that's just the justification in my head for why Luke did it so much better than me. But the main problem I was really struggling with was where in the last weapon drill I had finally kind of gotten down this idea of sidestepping stepping alongside the targets and kind of shooting while they're walking and alongside them. With this one, these Spartans just randomly stop, start going the other way, they crouch, and it just always felt like no matter what I was doing, they were one step ahead of me at all times. I was also trying to completely minimize the amount of reloads that I would have to do. So a lot of the time I was trying to finish off these Spartans with just half a mag each so that I would not have to reload very often, which technically in theory I should be able to do, but I just felt a lot of the times my bullets were just going right around their heads and not popping those final shots I would need on them quick enough. I'll be completely honest, as embarrassing as this is, I probably spent over 2 hours on this single weapon drill just not able to beat it. My hands were straight up just cramping up from holding down the trigger so often. And we do challenges on this channel all the time, and usually they're just patience related. We try and try and try again until we get it, but this one really was feeling like a skill level just beyond my own capability. Don't get me wrong, I could tell that I was improving, consistently hitting 19,000 points, and with generally each Spartan you kill giving you about 2,000 points, I was very close where I needed 22,000 points, which means I would usually have to finish off the Spartan that I wasn't finishing off by the time the time ran out, and then get another Spartan on top of that. And it was just this awful attempt after attempt where I would be getting it right down to the wire. I would kill 9 Spartans and the 10th Spartan would have no shields and time would run out and I'd kill it, and then the killing frenzy would pop up, but I didn't have enough points still. I definitely tried a lot of different things, like really bursting my shots to see if that would decay the shields quick enough or if that would help me preserve ammo for the headshot part. And honestly, all of those ideas were good, but none of them were actually what ended up helping me get through this one and finally beat it to get the 3 stars. It kind of was a mix of me finally getting an RNG where I could quickly flick to one Spartan to the other. I adjusted my sensitivity a little bit just to speed myself up a little bit more. After all of this time and just trying and trying and trying again, I finally came up with this strategy where instead of going for those burst shots I tried earlier, I would shoot directly at the Spartan and just go ahead and throw one entire magazine if need be at a Spartan. The one thing though that definitely changed the game up though is the second I felt like the recoil was getting out of control, I would stop shooting for a split second. I did this and I just kept moving as fast as possible, taking out the Spartans. I noticed my score was going up, was getting very, very close. I had to run it again and again and again until finally, somehow, I did manage to, in fact, beat this one. And somehow I forgot to record it with my Xbox game DVR, probably because I was so excited and I was celebrating, but I did, in fact, get 23,000 points, which was even slightly more than that was needed to even beat this one. Okay, to be fair, the assault rifle was one of the hardest weapons, but there's a couple more that really were just absurdly difficult. Now, after all that struggling with the assault rifle, the pulse carbine was not nearly as bad as anything that I experienced with the assault rifle. The first 2 were actually walks in the parks to get 3 stars on, and the last one did take a little bit of trial and error. This one wasn't nearly as hard to pull off the 3 stars in, though that third section was a little bit tricky and did give me a little bit of time where I had to kind of stay in practice. But the big takeaway that ended up completely changing this weapon drill on me was when I realized that my longer shots were more accurate and I was struggling the most shooting the Spartans that were close up. So I just stood at the back of the firing range and tried to shoot from long distance, and I completely destroyed the goal for 3 stars. So that little trick ended up going a really long way. Then things really don't mess around when you get into the BR challenge. I struggled a little bit in pretty much all 3 different BR challenges, even the level 1 one, which is supposed to be a walk in the park. I mean, sure, maybe I was just potato aiming around a little bit. You have to hit every single one of your shots pretty much in all 3 challenges if you're going to stand a chance at getting the score you need to get 3 stars. Now, the first challenge, with a little bit of practice, you can get the 3 stars more or less as long as you're moving fast enough and not missing any of your shots, but everything's standing still, so it shouldn't be too hard. Was actually pretty difficult for me. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm on controller, but I really struggled to keep up with the moving targets to make sure I wasn't missing any of my shots. Because once you start missing shots, you end up having to lose more time, and with how close things end up being with the timer, you literally can't risk the reload. Now, fortunately enough, it did seem like after doing this over and over again, there were some little tricks that definitely do help this overall process. For level 2, which was was still pretty challenging, there are fusion coils laid out, and if you utilize them at the right time, you can either get a straight up kill on one of the Spartans or one-shot the Spartan afterwards, saving how many times you overall have to reload, which was helping me when I was just almost at the point of getting enough points, but just quite not making it. Then with BR3, the Spartans are crouchy boys, and they're just moving around, and it seemed like they knew every one of my shots. They were Neo and the Matrixing on me. The actual strat, though, that I felt so dumb when I realized is to not aim. For whatever reason, I just felt like my accuracy was so much better. I was doing a better job following them moving, predicting what was going on, and reacting to their movement when I was zoomed out. So for whatever reason, that ended up being the way I was able to complete this one. Luke, on the other hand, he just flew through these three with little to no problem. He struggled a little bit on the very first one, but the second and third one, shooting the fusion coils and hip firing, definitely helped on PC. Of course, Luke is really good at first-person shooters on PC in general, though. But yeah, for me at least, the BR was a pretty big challenge. Next, though, we were moving on to the Commando. Now, the first version of the Commando is pretty easy to get through. You literally just line up your shot for the chest, and the recoil itself after a couple of shots will kind of put you right at the head when it's time to go for the headshot after breaking the shields. So once you're just fast enough at turning and pointing, this one's not that hard at all. Level 2 does step things up a little bit, and if you don't have the right strategy, it could be pretty difficult. I spent a little bit of time before I figured out a strategy that worked for me, which essentially is just sidestepping alongside the Spartans, and it pretty much kept my aim on point the whole way through. Level 3, on the other hand, this one, it was a little bit more challenging than the rest. You have to not only go very fast paced, but sometimes you just completely lose control of the Commando. And it can be incredibly frustrating when you're making good time and then you just mess up on one magazine and miss a ton of your shots that you probably should have hit. I won't lie, I was stuck on this one for quite some time, but the main thing that I did to get through this was focus right in on that reticle, paying attention to where that was when it turned red, and when it was kind of me leading shots rather than chasing shots, I seemed to do a lot better. Still, I really struggled on this one just getting enough kills and moving along fast enough. I felt like my accuracy was good enough, I just couldn't seem to keep up with the speed needed to get the 3 stars, but eventually after a ton of trial and error, I did manage to keep up. But I did notice not aiming down the sights on this one was more beneficial than trying to aim, for instance. Okay, so then the shock rifle was the next weapon up, and honestly, this one, with a little bit of practice, wasn't too hard to clear. It's pretty much just accurate headshots and making sure you're not missing too many shots. But even then, I felt like I had a little bit of wiggle room where if I did mess up, I could still salvage it and not ruin my entire run. So this one wasn't too bad. But then we got to the sidekick, and this one does not mess around. This was definitely one of the ones that had its score increased, and it is by far, in my opinion, if you're on console especially, the absolute pinnacle of challenge when it comes to these things. I would actually argue with the way that it is set now that it is pretty high above the reasonable expectation or challenge that all of these other weapon drills are on, and I really struggled here to the point where I didn't think I would be able to complete them. Now, the first one did take a little bit of time, but I got it down without any problem. The second one was challenging enough, just trying to pace my shots out and make sure I was landing a ton of shots on the enemy, which they're kind of ducking down and it's super annoying. Luke struggled a little bit on this one too, but then when we got to the third part, things were very different between mouse and keyboard and controller. Luke had an easy time beating this, maybe 1 or 2 tries, and he got it. I, on the other hand, spent hours upon hours trying to get this one completed. While I was doing this, the main problem I kept running into is just the absurd number of shots it actually takes to break the shields and then kill a Spartan. And when you are being timed and you have to clear so many enemies, you essentially are required to rapid fire the pistol. But you're rapid firing the pistol over and over and over again, pretty much consistently non-stop for the 45-second period. And I don't know if I'm just weak, but my hand literally just kept cramping up, and it was physical pain just trying to shoot the trigger that quickly for a 45-second period of time. But if I slowed down the pace even slightly, I wouldn't get remotely close to having the score that I needed. I tried holding my controller a weird way, switching to a different finger to shoot the trigger, and that helped with the speed, but it seemed to make my hand more awkward on the thumbstick, which was important for aiming for the headshots. This one was beyond frustrating. It was always so close, but 1 or 2 kills shy every single time I tried, and after hours of trying, I literally was making no more progress. Like, this is just rapid fire pain, essentially. It's like one of those games where they make you mash a button and you're thinking to yourself, this is very excessive. That's how I felt, except on top of that, I'm trying to aim a gun too. But the whole time through it, I'm thinking if Luke didn't have any problem with this, it obviously must be completable on mouse and keyboard relatively easily. And just in general, I think the fact that on a mouse and keyboard you don't have to actually hold your hand the same way that you're kind of bending your fingers and balancing the controller up, it probably does make it a whole lot easier. Now, while I could have just switched to PC or plugged a mouse and keyboard up to my Xbox, I decided I was going to figure this out with a controller, so I started playing around with the button layouts on here. I tried shooting with the A button, which worked actually pretty well in not making my hand completely ache while I was shooting. However, my accuracy was awkward because I had to move my thumb off of the shooting button to realign the aim constantly. I then tried mapping it to the stick button so I could also aim at the same time, and that worked pretty well, but it did kind of jitter the aim a little bit too much. And then I also tried moving it to the top of the D-pad and use my other thumb to shoot, which did work, but of course I couldn't strafe side by side to help line up some of my shots. Ultimately, what ended up working for me and making progress was me just mapping the button from the right trigger to the right bumper, but it made all of the difference, surprisingly. And actually, after beating this one, that's how I kept my control layout for the rest of this run. I did switch back when I got into regular multiplayer just because I can't instinctively think to shoot the right bumper, but it actually did help me at least like keep my hand from just dying in the process. I think just in general, the bumper has a faster response than having to pull the trigger all the way down, and it did help me with the rapid firing of the pistol. Still, even with all of that, I think that this one is probably still listed higher than it maybe should be, and maybe they should find a good middle ground from what it was last flight and what they have this flight. But eventually I did actually clear it, and the only thing I can think of besides me switching the button layout around that contributed to it was just the fact that the random spawns of the Spartans was in my favor that one in particular time. So even once you maybe hit that skill cap that is required to complete it, you're just kind of waiting to hope that the Spartans spawn close to one side so you're not constantly looking left and right before you'll have enough points to clear it, which isn't probably how this game type is intended. But with that out of the way, I could breathe a little bit easier as I felt like I was in the home stretch and maybe things would start looking up. I had tried using the plasma pistol in multiplayer and never really had too much luck. So when we jumped into weapon drills, I actually was a little nervous about trying it, but honestly, it wasn't all that bad. I kind of switched up my strategies between trying the overcharged method or just spamming plasma pistol shots. And for the most part, after kind of tweaking some things along the way and lining up my shots a little bit better, this one didn't take me too long to clear all three parts on. The shotgun, the Bulldog, is actually really interesting because this, of all of the challenges that Luke and I had been trying, is the one that Luke had the most trouble with. And actually, I've seen a lot of people complain about the Bulldog on places like Twitter, where all of my experiences in matchmaking, I do pretty well with the shotgun, surprisingly. And going through this, I was able to clear all three parts with maybe a couple of tries on the last one, but Luke was just really struggling to get through it. So I have a theory, especially considering Luke is usually really good at FPSs. I think this specific shotgun might be a case where just with the way that the game is, having the extra little aim assist or whatever function is incorporated into having a controller does make a massive difference with the shotgun, where if you're using a mouse and keyboard, I don't think you have the advantage. I saw people like Arash really against the Bulldog, and he's a mouse and keyboard player, and like I said, I don't have any problem with it. I actually do pretty well with it. So it is interesting noticing that there are these differences between how the weapons play based off of what type of input is there. Maybe they'll make the shotgun better on mouse and keyboard, maybe they'll keep it the same way. For the heat wave, this one actually wasn't too hard at all. I just made sure to always have it in its vertical mode instead of its horizontal spread, and it just seemed like a walk in the park, just popping off and killing all those Spartans. Significantly easier than some of the other challenges, which does make me wonder wonder what's going on with this ramp in difficulty on some of the weapons, and then some of these just being incredibly easy. The Needler was one weapon I was fully anticipating to have a lot of trouble with, just because the fact that it has these bullets that are following the Spartans, but really it wasn't too bad. The hardest one was the third one, of course, where these Spartans are just walking back and forth, and it does make it a little bit hard to track the needles to the Spartan, but they do stop in some pretty predictable places. So after you've ran it a few times, you can kind of predict when the Spartan's going to stop, and you can almost ensure that you will be able to kill them during that moment. So it's actually not that bad once you start predicting the movement, and this one was easily accomplishable. Moving to the sniper, it is a 3-part challenge for sure, where any player jumping in will maybe struggle a little bit, but it's not one that necessarily feels bad. Like for instance, Luke and I both struggled a bit on the sniper one at first, but essentially the main thing here is you have to hit every single shot and still move quickly. And this one, at least when we weren't hitting our shots, we felt like it was because our skill level was lacking and not necessarily because the score is set to some weird oddity. So we were able to clear all 3 sniper sections with the 3 stars just after a little bit of trial, error, and practice. The Skewer was the next one on the list, and honestly, this one's not too bad. It actually is just kind of a lot of fun. I don't know, the Skewer in general is a fun weapon, and getting the 3 stars on it wasn't too hard. Once again, just make sure you're not missing your shots, and this one you can clear as well. Alright, I'll be honest, when it comes to the Ravanger, this was the only one in the entire list that I could not get 3 stars in all categories. The weapon itself, pretty easy to use here. Matter of fact, parts 2 and 3 I cleared with no problem at all. My main problem, surprisingly, was with part 1 and the set score that they expect players to get. Somehow, I think when they were adjusting the scores for this one, someone may have hit a 0 one extra time on 2 stars, because it says you need to get 125,000 points to get the 2nd star unlocked. Mind you, at this point, the shotgun at 3 stars was 25,000, the most points out of any of them, so 125,000 just seems so much more excessive, especially when test 2 and 3 don't require astronomical scores like that. So I definitely think someone hit a 0 one too many times here, and this one is just unable to be completed. Though I do have to say, after running this one a couple of times and testing it, I did manage to get 2 stars unlocked, but it gave me the 2 stars unlocked when I hit 18,000 points. So I think somewhere along the way it's glitched where it thinks it needs 18,000 for 3 stars, because that's what it says it's required, even though I scored beyond that. So I don't know. I think if I'm understanding it correctly, 2 stars should be around 12,500. Not 125,000, and then maybe for 3 stars you need 18,000. Once again, when I scored 19,000, it said score 18,000 to get 3 stars, so I don't get that. Nonetheless, this will probably be a very easy fix before launch. But unfortunately, I can't actually get the 3 stars on this one until it gets fixed. And lastly, as a big finale, we get the good old Spanker rocket launcher, and honestly, this one's just kind of fun. It doesn't seem like they had any intention of making this one a challenge, so it's kind of like a last hurrah after beating all of the weapon drills, if you, of course, do this one last and you don't just jump to it first. It is very easy. You just shoot the guys and have a good time. But nonetheless, outside of that one that I physically could not get the 3rd star on, we managed to get 3 stars on literally every single weapon drill, which is something we were really proud of. It may have been easier for Luke than it was for me, but it is something I was able to achieve with just an Xbox controller, so I am feeling proud. Did any of you guys try weapon drills, or are you going to try them upon Halo Infinite's launch? Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications on for more videos like this. We'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video.